everybody, it's Tanya and welcome to today's video. This video is going to be a second installment in a series which I started a few months back, or maybe almost a year back. I filmed the first installment, but I never continued. The series is reading all surviving ancient Greek tragedies. So the first installment was dedicated to Aeschylus, the first of the three great tragedians whose works we have surviving today. So if you haven't seen that video and if you're interested, I will link it up here so you can watch it. Today's installment, today's video, is dedicated to the second great tragedian, and that is, drum roll please, Sophocles. That is Sophocles. This video is going to be dedicated to him. Like I mentioned in the previous video, there is very few surviving ancient Greek tragedies, so the goal of reading all of them is actually very doable. Sophocles, for example, has only 7 surviving tragedies, and all of them are in these 2 books. I did read them after Aeschylus, but I didn't film anything. I was not in the mood for filming, and I just want to read and I don't want to film anything. And now I feel bad because actually I really do want to continue with this series. I feel like it's a good idea. I feel it can be interesting for you as well. So yeah, I'm going to reread them now because it has been already a few months, almost a year at least. I do remember what they're about, but you know, I remember that I also really liked them, so I don't mind rereading them. It's going to be a reread for me, but this time I will be talking to you about them because last time I just read them and didn't film anything. So yeah, let's start reading. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's going to be fun. As usual, I will prepare a short clip introducing you to Sophocles himself, and then after that we will jump into the plays. I will read them one by one and then come back to you with my thoughts and feelings and impressions. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, I hope you like it, and now let's jump into it. Hi everybody, so before we jump into Sophocles' plays, I think let's first talk about the man himself. I feel like it will give us a better rounded picture of him as a playwright. It will just help us see him as a person and yeah, just understand him better. So Sophocles, even during his lifetime and throughout the whole of antiquity, he was considered the most perfect playwright, the most perfect of all tragedians, and people even called him the pupil of Homer. Sophocles was the second out of the 3 great tragedians whose works we have preserved today. So he started his career after Aeschylus, but before Euripides. The Suda, which is an ancient 10th century encyclopedia compiled by a committee of scholars in Byzantium, reports that Sophocles wrote 123 plays. Out of these 123 plays, we have 7 surviving today. And these plays are
Ajax,
Antigone, Women of Trachis, Oedipus the King, Electra Philoctetes, and Oedipus at Colonus. Sophocles was born about 496 BC, and he was the son of Sophocles, a wealthy armor manufacturer who lived at Colonus, a small settlement, suburb I guess, of Athens. And Athens later will be Sophocles' favorite city. His whole life will be fully dedicated and connected to Athens. Coming from a wealthy family, Sophocles of course received a very good, extensive education. And when he was born, the tradition of dramatic competition was well established in the city. Dramatic competition had rapidly become an important part of city's life, and a great deal of expense was dedicated to performances that were shown in this dramatic competition. The main dramatic competition was the city Dionysia, which happened every year in the late March. The festival was an elaborately organized event which lasted for several days, and people from the whole city, women as well as men most likely, and people throughout the whole Greece came to Athens to attend city Dionysia. During this competition there were three sets of competitions. So one was dedicated to tragedy competition, then later, a few years later, comedy was added, and then the third competition was dithyrambs, so 2 sets of dithyrambs. In the tragic competition, 3 people were competing, and each of the playwrights had to present 4 plays. 3 of these plays were tragedies, and they were dedicated to one mythological topic, or they could be dedicated to some historical event. For example, Aeschylus, some of his plays were dedicated, the Persians for example, was dedicated to the Battle of Salamis, so that's a historical event. So 3 tragedies, and the 4th play was a satire play which treated a historical event, or again a mythological event, in a burlesque fashion. And it was always a tragic playwright who wrote satire plays. The same writer, the same playwright, never wrote both tragedies and comedies. It was like you had to choose one. You either write tragedies or you either write comedies. Sophocles first competed in 468 BC. At that time, his older contemporary Aeschylus had already been active for 30 years, and in his first competition, Sophocles was actually competing with Aeschylus, and he won. Sophocles took the first place, Aeschylus came the second that year, even though he still had some important victories in the future to come, but in 468 Sophocles took the first place. There is also a hypothesis, like a suggestion, that Sophocles might have been Aeschylus's student. If it's true, then this victory over his teacher must have been an important event and a very personal event in his life. In order to compete in city Dionysia, a playwright had to be known for his dramatic talent. Just anybody couldn't participate. Like, people had to know that you're a good playwright, because public was demanding. It was a favorite event, or at least one of favorite events in the city. Of course, public wanted to see the best of the best, so you had to be known. But unfortunately, there is no way for the scholars these days to know how a young person could develop these dramatic talents, because they didn't only have to write plays, they had to write plays in a poetic form, they had to produce and direct the play, as well as often act in this play in a leading role. Like, you had to have a lot of talents you know, to show your work to the public. And so we don't really know how Sophocles was able to develop the talents and how he was able to prove them. We don't have much information about them. So one suggestion is that he could have been Aeschylus' student, but it's just a hypothesis. Another hypothesis is that it could also be so that his family, somebody in his family, could have participated in the city Dionysia before him, and so he came next, kind of from the family of with these theatrical talents, theatrical interests. But again, we don't really know. In any way, somehow by his late 20s he was able to develop all of the necessary skills and all the necessary talents to participate in the competition, and thus started his long career as a playwright. And he continued this career for 60 years. and like I have already said, he has wrote 123 plays. The last time he competed was 406, and it was the same year as his death. In terms of victories in the competition, he was the most successful out of the three known to us playwrights. He won the City Dionysia 18 times. For your reference, Aeschylus won 13 times, and Euripides won only 4 times. So Sophocles was just a beloved playwright in Athens of the period. Outside of theater, he was also active in everyday life of the polis, of the Athens. He was a general at some point in his life. He also was a state's treasurer, and he also played an important part in religious cults of the city, in establishing of this religious cult of a healing god, some kind of healing god. It is also very likely that he had a very charismatic personality, because he was on short terms and on friendly terms with the most prosperous families of the city. The author of the introduction to the collection of his plays wrote that at some point he became a kind of a national treasure. So Sophocles apparently was a very special, very friendly and a charismatic man. He died at the age of 91 in 406, and to some extent you can say that he was lucky to die before the final surrender of Athens to the Sparta, which happened in 404. So yeah, he lived a long, fulfilling and just a great life, I guess. From what I found on the internet about his life, it seems to me that he was just a wonderful person who led a very interesting and fulfilling life, and the whole of his life was very closely connected to Athens, and he loved that city. And even in one of his last plays, Oedipus at Colonus, he praises Athens, and he praises Colonus as well, his birthplace. He had a great love for Athens. So that's what I could find for you about Sophocles. If you know some interesting facts about him, leave them down below in the comments. And now I am off to reading his plays. Rereading, actually, because I read them last year, but I didn't film the vlog because I didn't want to. I wasn't in the mood. Okay, now I'm in the mood. So now I'm rereading them, and yeah, I will be back to you. I will be back talking about the plays. Okay, see you soon. I thought, let's go and read some plays nice, because if I stay at home there will be no nice footage for you. Так что so I don't know where I can go, because the weather is not as hot, but it's still hot, so I cannot go to a park. I think I will go to some nice coffee shop somewhere in a nice area. So let's go together. I found a cute spot to tell you about. You see how nice? I like this spot. I'm here in the corner with the plants. I'm delighted. So I found a place to tell you about women of Trachis. I have understood that rereading things is actually a very good practice. I do it very rarely. I should do it more often because you pay closer attention when you reread things. I remember when I was reading this place, like all of this place, for the first time, I felt kind of disoriented because you don't really know like what is going to happen. You kind of follow the plot, you don't read very closely, you feel a little bit disoriented. That's how I felt the first time. Now when I'm rereading these things, they're building something, I'm sorry. Now when I'm reading this thing, I understand, like I actually feel very comfortable because I know what is going to happen. And I just read the text and I read it more closer, I guess, that's something like that. So yeah, The Women of Trachis. It's a play about death of Heracles, like how the Heracles died. And it starts off with his wife Denaria being at home and lamenting and missing him because he has been gone for past 15 months and there was no news about him. She has no idea where he is, what he is doing, if he is even alive. She is obviously very worried about him. We also understand immediately that she really loves him because she tells the story of how she became his wife. He saved her from like this river god who wanted her as his wife. So he saved her from him, and her father gave Denaria to Heracles. And so since then he has always been gone because he's a hero and he has to free the Greece from all the monsters. And she has been home waiting for him all these years and missing him and being worried for him. And now finally this is the time. He had a prediction by an oracle. There will be this last city that he will have to conquer, and after he conquers the city, he either stays alive and lives a happy life, a long happy life, or he dies. He left this prediction on a stone with Denaria, and she found the stone, she read the prediction, and now she is also like very worried as to is he alive or not. And then a messenger comes and he tells her that Heracles is alive and he has conquered the city and he is free and soon he is coming home to her. So she is on cloud 7, she is very happy, and this kind of, it sets the mood for even greater tragedy, I guess, because you can see how she is so happy. Everybody around is so happy. They're waiting for Heracles to come. They're waiting to live this happy life. Since he has conquered the city, they assume that that's it. He's going to live a long and happy life with Denaria. And yeah, so this very bright mood sets the scene for even greater tragedy, because it is a tragedy and you know that everybody is doomed. It's a very, very emotional read. I noticed with Sophocles, even like last time I read, his plays are much more emotional for me personally than Aeschylus's. Yeah, I can say that I enjoyed Sophocles' plays much more just because they were more emotionally charged for me personally. And this play is a great example because Heracles is just in agony. Denaria herself is also in agony because she didn't intend to kill her husband, and like the whole household and everybody, very emotional. And yeah, this play is just really, really emotionally charged. I will talk more about this play when I come home because now people are coming and I'm like shy. So I will, we will talk about this play more when I come home. I can say this really is a pleasure to read. It's a very quick to read, it's only 50 pages. So yeah, okay, let's go home. So I'm finally home, and let's finish the conversation about Women of Trachis. As it is said in the introduction, because each play in this book has its own introduction, which is really helpful, and as it said in the introduction, this play is a variation on the main event of Aeschylus's play, Agamemnon. So the main event there is obviously Clytemnestra murdering her husband. This play takes the same event, the same situation, but looks at it in a different way. And it's very likely that Sophocles here adds his own spin to the story, because he makes Denaria a very likable, very genuine, gentle and compassionate person. And that most likely wasn't the tradition. That most likely wasn't the way the original story looked at her, because her name Denaria is translated as husband murderer or man destroyer. So apparently the tradition view on the woman was just like on Clytemnestra, you know, this angry, jealous wife who murdered her husband in case of Denaria because she was jealous of this young beautiful concubine that he brought with him from his travels and from his adventures, and so because she was jealous she murdered him. However, in this play events take different kind of course. I mean, she still murders him, but she doesn't mean to. In this play, she genuinely loves her husband, and when she learns that the young girl is going to be his concubine and that he has a great passion for this girl, she actually is very forgiving, and she is very understanding, and she's like, if I feel so much passion towards him, how can I blame him for having passion towards this girl? Like, we are in the same situation, I understand him. And she is actually very understanding and forgiving here. All she wants is to just have her husband back. She just wants his love back, and so what she's doing, she's trying to return his love. And that's very different from what Clytemnestra was doing. Like, that is not at all what Clytemnestra was doing. On the other hand, Heracles, the way Heracles is shown here, on one hand he is really unlikable. The way he reacts to what happened to him, and the way he reacts to what his wife has done to herself is completely atrocious. The way he treats his faithful servant who brought the gift from Denaria is also completely terrible. Like, Heracles is just a terrible person. He is like just like the monster that he was killing before. But on the other hand, at certain moment when he understands that this is his destiny, like this is what gods have predicted for him, when he understands that there is nothing to do, it's God's will, he calms down and he becomes kind of wise and he becomes calm. At that moment you start to respect him. But before that I couldn't, because he was just so terrible. Like, everything he said, the way he behaved was completely terrible. But then you kind of see him from a different angle when this understanding happens. Obviously, one of the main topics of this play is passion, as like this kind of animal passions that guide decisions and actions of majority of the characters, especially of the two main characters, Denaria and Heracles. Both of them are very passionate people, and this passion brings them both down. But it's not just that. There is also this topic of fate and gods. Gods are not really present in this book, but they're always, you always feel them looking from above and kind of guiding everything. And I guess this human suffering that Heracles is undergoing is shown as something that can elevate human soul, because according to, again, myth and tradition, Heracles, after his death, he was ascended onto the Mount Olympus and he became God, the only person, the only hero who became God. This was possible only through the suffering that he underwent. Plan of gods, I guess, in all of his situation. And yeah, the human suffering as this elevating thing that, yeah, brings soul to a different level. This play was definitely interesting, especially because I don't really know much about Heracles. I never really knew what happened to him after he, like, obviously everybody knows about his, like, you know, adventures, but I never knew what happened to him afterwards. In the end of the play, he is also asking his son to build his pyre, but nobody wants to light the pyre. And this story will actually continue in the last play in here. The last play here is Philoctetes, and Philoctetes is very connected to Heracles, but we will talk about it after we reach that point. We will talk about it when we talk about Philoctetes, because right now, like, after you read this play, you don't really understand how Heracles is going to ascend to the Mount Olympus. Nobody wants to light his pyre. Like, he is asking his son to build his pyre and, you know, burn him, and his son, like, I cannot do that. I'm not gonna do that. I don't want to. So, and obviously, like, nobody wants to burn Heracles. We will continue this conversation when we talk about Philoctetes. First play, reread. I really enjoyed the reread, especially because I was more kind of present. I was more concentrated on the story. It flew by. It's really fast to read, just 50 pages, very fast to read. I liked it. I really enjoyed it. So now off to Ajax. I remember from my previous reading that Ajax was one of my favorite plays, and it's actually the one I remember the best. And Philoctetes, like Philoctetes and Ajax, I remember the best. And I don't really know why. I guess just Ajax, I'm partial to Ajax. I remember him from Iliad, and I liked him also in the Iliad. So yeah, next reread is going to be Ajax, and I'm looking forward to it. We will talk about it after I finish reading it. Hi everybody, finished rereading Ajax. Enjoyed it, I think, even more than the last time, just like with the Women of Trachis, because again I was more present and I already knew what was going to happen, so I was just enjoying the story itself and the text itself. Really liked it again. And even from my previous reading, I already knew that I enjoyed this story really a lot, and it was the one that stayed with me the longest. I think it's due to the fact that I have already known Ajax. I remember him from the Iliad and from the Odyssey, and I liked him even back then. I think the most memorable probably thing about Ajax will be book 7. I found it again today. It's book 7. It's his fight with Hector. the Prince of Troy. It all starts with the fact that so the Achaeans and the Trojans are fighting, and so the Trojans have already moved the Achaeans, the Greeks, to their ships, and that's like when Zeus was helping the Trojans. But then Zeus kind of stopped helping them. He turned his eyes somewhere else and while Zeus was preoccupied with something else, that's when Athena decided to help Greeks, because Athena was supporting Greeks. And then Apollo noticed that Apollo was supporting the Trojans, and he was like, Athena, excuse me, can we do something else? I know what you're about to do, but I have a better idea. It is so, like, it's really, like, Iliad is a really interesting story. And Apollo suggests that he will tell Hector to challenge a single most strongest Greek for a duel, and duel to the death, like one of them will have to die. But he says Hector that that's not your time, you will not die in this duel, because I heard the conversation of the gods and that's not your time, so you most surely will not die. So now invite a Greek for a duel. And Hector is like, whoa, okay. And he challenges the Greeks. He is like, whatever is willing, whoever is feeling strong enough, fight me. And so the Greeks first, they're like sitting, nobody wants to fight Hector, because Hector is like, you know, one of the maybe the best fighter between Trojans. And then Menelaus is like, why are you all sitting? Why nobody wants to defend your honor? And Menelaus is like, I'm gonna do that. And then his brother's like, Menelaus, whoa, he is a better man than you, everybody knows it, you're just gonna die there, let's not do that, sit down. And Menelaus is like, okay. But then Agamemnon himself and a few other, Ajax included, they volunteer. And they have this, they draw the stones. They put stones with their marks, like in a helmet, and they mix them, and then they choose one, and the one belonged to Ajax. And so the 7th book in the Iliad is dedicated to the fight between Hector and Ajax. And they fight all day. All day they fight, and no one can win. And then at the end, Zeus finally turns his eye back to the fight, and he's like, stop the fight, call it a draw, and that's it. And so in this book, Ajax gives a gift to Hector, and Hector gives Ajax a gift as well. And that gift is his sword, and that is important. So Hector gives Ajax his sword. Another book that Ajax is also very present in is the book 13. That's where he is fighting again on the side of the Greeks, and he's like defending the ships, and he's also very present there. Yeah, Ajax just is very prominent figure in the Iliad. He is second best fighter after Achilles. He can even compete with Achilles. Achilles is just better in killing people, but Hector is physically stronger. They are actually cousins. Ajax the Great and Achilles, they are cousins. And they were studying together. Chiron, what was the name of the creature? You know, the person and the body of the horse. So basically, Achilles' teacher, Chiron, he was also teacher of Ajax. And they were like, you know, studying and learning together. And so Ajax is the second best fighter among the Greeks. Death of Ajax is mentioned, however, in the Odyssey, but it's mentioned very briefly. It's mentioned, again, I found today, it's mentioned in the book 11. And it's just a few lines. Let me read them to you, because it's interesting and it's very related to the play of Sophocles. Like, you are thinking, why are you telling me all of that? That's because it's very related. That is related. So let me read you the mentioning of Ajax's death in the Odyssey, book 11. So that's the part where Odysseus is talking about his visit to the underworld. And in the underworld, he met all the different heroes who are currently dead. And so one of the heroes was Ajax, and that's what he tells about his meeting with Ajax. Now the rest of the gods, the dead and gone, came swarming up around me, deep in sorrow there, each asking about the grief that touched him most. Only the ghost of great Ajax, son of Telamon, kept his distance, blazing with anger at me still for the victory I had won by the ships that time. I pressed my claim for the arms of Prince Achilles. His queenly mother has sent them up as prizes. Pallas and captive Trojans served as judges. Would to God I'd never won such trophies. All for them the earth closed over Ajax. This is the important part. All for them the earth closed over Ajax, that proud hero Ajax, greatest in build, greatest in works of war of all the Argives, after Pelas's matchless son. I cried out to him now, I tried to win him over. Ajax, son of noble Telamon, still determined, even in death, not once to forget that rage you train on me for those accursed arms. The gods set up the prize to plague the Achaeans. So great a tower of strength we lost when you went down. For your death we grieved as we did for Achilles' death. We grieved incessantly, true, and none's to blame but Zeus, who hated Achilles fighting spearmen so intensely. Zeus sealed your doom. Come closer, king, and listen to my story. Conquer your rage, your blazing headstrong pride. So I cried out, but Ajax answered not a word. So this is a very short episode about the death of Ajax. It's not really mentioned how he died. That you will learn from the play of Sophocles. But it does mention that he died because of the arms of Achilles. So, as you might have already guessed, this play is dedicated to the story of the death of Ajax, second greatest hero among the Greeks. Why I liked it so much is first because I really like the person himself, the hero himself, and second because the way he died is really heart-wrenching. If you remember, if you read the Iliad, if you read the Odyssey, you remember him as a great warrior who fights for the Greeks, who is all bent on Greeks' victory over the Trojans, who gives his everything for his people. However, the way he dies, what happens? Because it's not the whole story is told in the play. It all started after the Achilles' death. If you might remember, Achilles' mother Thetis, she went to Hephaestus and she asked Hephaestus to make these arms for her son because she hoped that these arms would save him from the prophecy that he would die after he killed Hector. Hephaestus makes the arms. Achilles dies anyway. And then imagine the arms made by God himself. Of course everybody wants the arms, of course everybody wants this armor. But only the greatest can get it. And so the greatest, two of the greatest warriors of the Greeks that are left are Ajax and Odysseus. And so they make this competition. But the competition was not based on the fighting skills, if like I understood it correctly. Somehow they just had to convince the people, even like by speech, that they are the ones deserving of the armor. And Odysseus wins. Odysseus wins because he is better at speaking, and he is better at convincing, and the armor is his. That hurts Ajax very much because he was believed to be the second only to Achilles. So naturally Achilles' armor should be his. And then this Odysseus comes and just, you know, talks and receives his armor that like logically and like honestly would belong to him, like would have to belong to him. That hurts him, because now apparently he's not the second to Achilles, he is now the third, and he feels like his honor has been hurt and he has to avenge it, and he has to return his honor. And his plan is to murder the people who have damaged his honor, including Odysseus, Agamemnon, and Menelaus. But Athena knows his plan, and she intervenes, and she makes him kind of insane for a short period of time. And so I will not spoil you this play. I will stop here. So Athena intervenes. He doesn't succeed in his plan. But then what happens next is described in this play, and the play is really, really interesting. I like it because first of all, it shows Ajax in a completely different, from a completely different perspective. In the Iliad, he is a hero. In here, he is more of a traitor. His pride is shown here. His pride is just to the next level. It's through the roof. And that's one of the topics of the play, that human pride is the greatest of all sins, and it can bring down even the best, even those who probably should be, they have things to be proud of. I don't know if they should be proud, but they have things to be proud of. But one of the Greek belief is that nothing should be in excess. Everything needs to be in moderation, right? And Ajax's pride is too much. There is no moderation to it, and that's what brings him down. He also, you could see his pride once in the Iliad when Athena wanted to help him, and he answered her that go and help someone else, I can do it myself. That of course angered Athena, and that's why she turned against him in this play, because she was offended with him before. She wanted to help, and he refused the god. He rejected a god, like the pride. And actually one of the important words here are by Athena herself, and she says that gods love those who are humble and who know their place. Ajax wasn't one of them. Odysseus in this play is one of the likable characters. There aren't many likable characters here, to be honest. Like Ajax isn't really very likable. He is, in case of Ajax, you really feel very sorry for him. You really feel very sorry, especially if you know the story of him from the Iliad. You feel so sorry for him, but also you understand that it's his fault. He went too far. The sword of Hector that I said that it's important, it will be present here. Sword of Hector is important, it's here. Odysseus is very likable. I liked him the most because he is the one with the good thinking, you know. Even though Ajax is his foe, even though Ajax wants to kill him, Odysseus understands it, he forgives it, and he just does the right thing. He does the right thing, and he forces others to do the right thing, and I like it. I really like it about Odysseus. Odysseus isn't always likable. Like, for example, in the Philoctetes, in the last play, I remember when I read it, Odysseus there is a really unlikable character. Like, Odysseus is like no in there. But in Ajax, I even have like a note here. I wrote it like, love Odysseus. He is like a parent, the only adult among children. Like, that's I wrote here when I was reading. So yeah, Odysseus, I really liked him in here. So yeah, great play. Also in the introduction it is said that this play is actually about changing morals, how the morals are changing, because Ajax is a representative of old moral code that said that there is the most important things that a hero should worry about. The first one is arete. Arete is your fighting skills, is how good you are at war, how strong you are, how brave you are. Yeah, you know, all of those qualities that make you a great warrior. The second one is that people have to respect a person with arete. Like, he has to receive respect from people. Another one is that one should do bad things to his enemies and should do good things to his friends. So that's why Ajax, he sees that his arete is undermined and he has to defend it. And from his perspective, Odysseus, Agamemnon, Menelaus, they become his enemies. And it's logical that now he has to hurt them, he has to fight them. Odysseus, however, is a representative of a new moral code. And this moral code says that you have to be moderate, you have to be logical, you have to be sensible, you have to act according to the situation. This might be your enemy, but it doesn't mean that you have to always hurt him if there are reasons not to, you know. If there are good reasons not to. If you have to show respect sometimes, stuff like that. Like, Odysseus represents like a new way of thinking. Odysseus represents new Greece, when Ajax represents old Greece, and the old Greece dies. So that's the Ajax. I really like this play. Like, honestly, Ajax, I would recommend you reading this play. But first, if you haven't read the Iliad, read the Iliad first, then you will know who he is, and then this play you will just see it differently, you know, you will feel it differently. When you know people, you feel stories about them differently. So yeah, Ajax, great. I really like this play. Next play that I'm going to read is Electra. Again, I remember what it's about, I know what happens there. And also it's a story that is portrayed in Aeschylus in his Aristeia trilogy, so I also remember it from there, but it's going to be a little bit different. We will talk about Electra after I read it, and yeah, see you soon. Hi everybody. So, finished rereading Electra by Sophocles. I have to say, this is not my favorite play of his. It's not because the play is somehow lacking. Actually, it's his oldest play, and it's considered his best play actually, and like, I can see why, I understand why, but I just so deeply dislike the main character. I so deeply dislike her. I just generally don't like this type of people, and I don't enjoy reading about them. Like, I don't want to know them, I don't want to have anything to do with them. In general, like, even in life, I'm just not interested in books about them and in like stories, plays about them. I just want to stay as far as possible from like this type of people, which is like fanatics, you know, like fanatic people, whatever type of fanatic they can be about. I have no tolerance towards like any like fanatic behavior, and I just yeah, I just oh, stay away. I just stay away as far as possible. And this play is about a fanatic. Electra, in my like perception of her, she's a fanatic, and I don't like it, really don't like it. Even though the play is actually done so well, like, it's written really well. You see the character of Electra, you see her motivations, but you also see how just insane she is, how totally like insane and crazy she is. Okay, so let's talk about the story. What is the story actually about? I will not go too much into detail about the whole big story, because it's actually a story of a family. The family of Agamemnon is the most dysfunctional family in human history. The most dysfunctional story you could come across. I talk about some part of it, like not the whole lineage. I don't talk about the whole lineage. I talk about like Agamemnon, the pre-history of like what happened prior to his murder. I talk about it in a video about Aeschylus. So I would suggest watching that first, because it gives you like the whole story. It gives you what is this all about, because Electra is just a small part of this big, huge story. So I would suggest first watching that video, or if you are reading Sophocles' Electra, first read the Aristeia trilogy by Aeschylus. We are very lucky because we have 3 interpretations of these events by 3 different tragedians. So Aeschylus wrote his trilogy on these events, Sophocles wrote his play Electra, and Euripides also wrote his play Electra. They look at these events from different perspectives. They look at these events from positions of different people. For example, Aeschylus makes Orestes the main character. Sophocles makes him a secondary character, and he puts Electra in the center of the story. This story was, I guess, beloved in ancient Greece for the reason that it provides a good material for discussing some ethical and moral issues. The kind of common understanding, common moral code of the time was to do harm to your enemies, to do good to your friends. Any kind of bad deed and murder has to be punished, it has to be avenged. But at the same time, murdering your family, murdering your parents, especially murdering your mother, a person whose body gave you life, it implied pollution for the perpetrator of the deed. And that's exactly the story of Orestes. That's exactly what happens in Orestes' story, and that's why the story was so popular. Aeschylus looks at it from this moral and ethical point of view. That's why he takes the story as a whole, from the very beginning, from Agamemnon coming home from the Trojan War, Clytemnestra murdering him, and then Orestes avenging his father, and then further. So Aeschylus looks at the story as a whole. Sophocles and Euripides aren't so much interested in these moral and ethical issues. They are more interested in the characters. Sophocles' Electra, I still haven't read Euripides, so I cannot talk about Euripides, but Sophocles, he is interested in Electra. He is interested in the woman herself, like what kind of woman would so desperately want to murder her own mother. Because in here, like I said, Orestes isn't actually at the center of the story. He is present, he is quite calculated, I would say. He's very cold-minded, he is very goal-oriented, this goal of, you know, avenging the death of his father. But that's not interesting to Sophocles that much. Electra is more interesting because she was the one who saved Orestes, because when Clytemnestra murdered Agamemnon, Electra took the baby Orestes and she helped him to escape, and so he escaped this house because there was a possibility that he could also be murdered. He grew up somewhere far away, and so now he is coming back to avenge his father because he received this order from Apollo. Electra all this time was living in the palace with her mother and with her mother's lover, who now became the king and the queen of the city. She is completely reluctant to forget what her mother has done. She is reluctant to let it go, to forgive. She is reluctant to take her mother's position, and like, you can, again, I will not talk about her mother's take on this whole event, because I talk about it in Aeschylus's video, so just watch that video. But Electra is completely refusing to let go of the murder, and she desperately requires her father to be avenged. She wants to murder her mother. She is waiting for Orestes to come and murder her mother, and that's what interests Sophocles. Electra is kind of compared to her sister. Her sister, unlike Electra, is, I wouldn't say submissive, but she understands her position. She hates what her mother has done. She understands that she has to be punished, but at the same time she refuses to be the person who punishes. She refuses to join Electra in her lamentations, in her constant crying, and her constant abuse of like her mom and her mother's lover. And that's why she is able to live a comfortable life. Like, she disapproves of her mother, but she understands her position. She understands that she can't do much, and in order to just live her life, she just has to accept things the way they are, and just be kind of sensible and look after yourself first. That's what her sister is doing. Electra, however, refuses to do that, and that's why she is living in a very bad life, because her mom is obviously abusing her back. Her mom's lover also abuses her back, and Electra lives a very uncomfortable, very life full of hatred. That obviously, I guess, would affect everybody's psyche, everybody's kind of head, and eventually we slowly see her deteriorate, because she starts as just a daughter kind of lamenting her father's death, but by the end of the book she is completely insane. She's just that's it. Completely insane, completely mad, and I just I did not enjoy reading about that at all. I found one interpretation on the internet that to ancient Greek people, this Electra's obsession with her father, her inconsolable grief for her father's death, looks less as a daughter crying for her father, but more like a lovelorn widow, because they suggest a daughter would mourn more in a more dignified way. The way Electra behaves looks more like an abandoned lover, and that's why they suggest that it might have been so that ancient Greek would see incest between Electra and Agamemnon. So it's just one interpretation. I don't know how truthful that is, but I just thought it could be interesting, because she really behaves like a crazy woman. This introduction here actually suggests an interesting interpretation of this play, which I will read to you. I like what it says about this play. So Sophocles' play carries the implication that revenge is as ruinous to its human agents as it is to its victims. So while the play's action appears to show Orestes and Electra finally triumphing over their foes, the tragedy is that by a hideous irony they themselves are destroyed morally as the drama progresses. I haven't noticed about Orestes being destroyed morally, even though he from the very beginning he is shown as a terrible kind of person, like not a very good person. But with Electra, I guess you can say that, because in the beginning she is looking more dignified than what she behaves like by the end of the play. By the end of the play she is just through the roof. She is just insane, straightforward insane. So I really like this interpretation that the author suggests in the introduction. One example of her very vindictive and angry nature that she becomes by the end of the play is that In her last lines of an extremely long part, Electra tells Orestes, by implication, to expose Aegisthus's body to be devoured by the dogs and vultures. This surely connotes the total loss of her humanity. So yeah, Electra, definitely an interesting play, but just because I didn't enjoy the subject of it, I can't call it my favorite, but it's really well written, I guess. But I just didn't enjoy it very much. I think I enjoyed the Aristeia trilogy by Aeschylus more, just because it didn't have this fanatic person of a main character at the center of the book. So yeah, Electra, done. And now I am off to the last play in this book, and I think it will be the last play for this video, because this video is turning really long and I don't want it to be like 4 hours. I already make very long videos, so I think I will just read this book in this video, and then his Theban plays I will read for the second part of this video, because then it will be just I will be able to keep the video shorter this way. So yeah, the last play for this video will be Philoctetes, and that's my favorite. It's like up there along with Ajax, so I'm looking forward to rereading it, and I'm looking forward to talking about it with you. So I hope you're as excited as I am. Everybody, the last for this video, the last and one of my favorite plays. Let's talk about it. Philoctetes. It's right up there with Ajax. I cannot choose my favorite. I think Ajax would be my favorite as a play, just as a play. But Philoctetes is up there. It's up there with Ajax. Let's talk about the character first, because talking from my perspective, talking for myself, because I never studied like ancient Greek literature, I never studied ancient Greek kind of culture, so I have never heard of Philoctetes. I've never heard of this hero before. Like before I read the play by Sophocles, I didn't really know who he was. And then when I read the play and I started like looking him up on the internet and like learning about who is this person, excuse me, he's a person. Like he's a person. You know, he's very good, he's very interesting. Let me tell you about Philoctetes, because if you are like me, if you don't know who he is, you're missing out. He is great, he's a great man, and he is a very interesting story. So remember when I finished reading Women of Trachis, I said that we will continue the conversation when we talk about Philoctetes. We are continuing. So remember how the Women of Trachis ended. It ended with Heracles dying and his son building a pyre for him and refusing to light the pyre. Without lighting the pyre, Heracles wouldn't be able to ascend to the Mount Olympus. But obviously, who wants to be the one to burn Heracles? Like, who would be the person who was ready to take the responsibility upon himself to basically, you know, finish Heracles up and just, you know, burn him? His son refused. Everybody refused. Philoctetes was the person who agreed to light the pyre for Heracles. And after the pyre was lit, Heracles' apotheosis was enabled, and Heracles was able to ascend to the mountain of Olympus. According to one version of the events, Philoctetes was Heracles' close friend. He was kind of his armor bearer, and they were traveling together, so they were close with each other. According to another version, they didn't really know each other, and Philoctetes was just passing by when Heracles was looking for someone to light his fire. He was just a passerby. And according to another version of this legend, is that it was actually Philoctetes' father who led the pyre, because Heracles and Philoctetes' father were the Argonauts. So Philoctetes' father was one of the members of the crew of the ship of Argo, which traveled with Jason for the Golden Fleece. I haven't read the story, so I don't know what happened with the Golden Fleece. But Philoctetes' father had something to do with the Argonauts, which I will read it later, and later I will know, but now I don't know. But he was in that story. According to the third version of these events, it was Philoctetes' father who was the friend of Heracles and who lit the fire, and as a gratitude for this help, Heracles gave his magic bow and his magic arrows, which were famous for, I guess, never missing a target. After Philoctetes lit the pyre, he received the bow and the arrows, according to one version directly from Heracles, according to another version from his father. So that's how the story of Philoctetes began. He became very known throughout Greece. He became the best arrowman in Greece, even better than his father. His father was very famous for being really good with arrows. Philoctetes overcame him and he became even better than his father. Now, archer, the word is archer. Later on, when news about Helen came, that Helen is looking for husband, Philoctetes was actually one of the suitors. He went to participate in the competition for the hand of the most beautiful woman in Greece, Helen. Again, I didn't know that. It was a complete surprise for me. Like I said, I never knew Philoctetes, and like when I learned that he was everywhere, he participated literally in almost every single story, I was like, whoa, interesting. So yeah, he also was a suitor of Helen, but obviously he lost. Menelaus was chosen as the future husband of Helen, but Philoctetes took the oath that all suitors of Helen took, that they will protect her, that they will protect her husband, and everything like that. And when Helen was kidnapped, and when the whole expedition to Troy was assembled, Philoctetes was invited because he was bound by the oath to go and protect Menelaus's honor and return back Helen. So he went to Troy with all the Greeks, and he was the head of like 7 ships, I think. So he was like up there. He was an important figure. However, on their way to Troy, Greeks stopped at an island of Lemnos, I think. What is the name of the island? Lemnos, yes. They stopped at the island of Lemnos. And there, Philoctetes was bitten by a snake. The snake was sent by Hera because she was angry with Philoctetes for helping her nemesis, her also hateful Heracles, because he helped him to lit the fire and he helped Heracles to become a god. Hera became furious with him and she sent the snake, and the snake bit Philoctetes on the island of Lemnos. He didn't die, but he received a terrible wound that was torturing him. It was so painful. He was screaming and there was a lot of pus coming from his wound, and it really interfered with all the Greeks, because as Odysseus describes in the play, they couldn't even do any offerings to the gods, they couldn't pray to the gods because he was constantly screaming with pain. He was smelling bad because of the pus. And Greeks, it was Odysseus's idea, and he suggested it to Agamemnon and Menelaus. They decided to leave Philoctetes on the island. So one morning he wakes up there alone, without his friends, without Greeks, with no food, no water to drink. He's left completely alone on the island. 10 years fast forward. He's still on the island. He's using his bow and his arrows to hunt for the animals to eat. His wound is still torturing him. he is still completely alone. But it is already after the death of Achilles. And Greeks, they still cannot win Troy. They still cannot break the walls. They still cannot ruin the city. And they receive a prophecy that the city will not be taken without bow and arrows of Heracles. Where are the bow and the arrows? They are with Philoctetes. So Greeks have to go back to the island of Lemnos after 10 years, see the man they left there 10 years ago, and convince him, if he is still alive. They actually hope that he is not alive. Then they would just take the bow and they would just take the arrows and just bring them. But he is alive. This play, Philoctetes, is dedicated to the events when Odysseus and Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, come to the island of Lemnos to get the bow and to get the arrows, and they discover that Philoctetes is alive, and now they have to convince him to come and help the Greeks after what the Greeks have done to him. And Odysseus understands that he's not gonna come. Like, he's not gonna forgive, he's not gonna just go and help the Greeks. He understands it. And so Odysseus has, obviously, it's Odysseus. Odysseus always has a plan. Odysseus is just a plan generator. So Odysseus has a plan, and yeah, so this play is about how Odysseus and Neoptolemus are going to bring Philoctetes to Greeks to help. So that's the events. So I will not be talking like what happens in the play, that you can read. However, what happens next, because that's not when the story of Philoctetes finishes, because obviously, like, he refuses to come, but ultimately he agrees, and the story continues later. Like, it's not in the play anymore, it's just like after, when he comes. There were doctors, talented doctors in the Greek army who healed his leg and who healed his wound, which obviously like causes questions, like, why couldn't they heal it back then? Why couldn't they heal it 10 years ago? But whatever, they heal it 10 years later, and now he is, like, you know, all safe and sound, and he is participating and he is fighting with the Trojans. He was the one who killed Prince Paris. Excuse me, it was Philoctetes. I didn't know. I was so surprised. Like, this whole story of Philoctetes is such a huge surprise to me. He is such an important figure, and I've never heard of him. And I'm like, oof. So I learned. Now I learned discoveries in life. So yeah, he was the one who murdered, who killed Paris. And then, because even with the death of Paris, Troy didn't fall. Obviously, again, Odysseus's great idea, this horse, and Philoctetes was inside of the horse, and yeah, he was participating in the massacre and, you know, the fight inside of the Troy. However, he wasn't blamed for any sacrilege that happened during the final battle inside of the Troy, and I guess for committing of the sacrilege, all the main figures of the war, as Odysseus and Agamemnon, they had so much difficulties coming back home. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe like I misunderstand this like connection, but I so understood that Odysseus as well as Agamemnon and other like prominent figures in the Trojan War had all the difficulties coming home because they committed sacrilege during the fight inside of Troy. Correct me if I'm wrong, it's just my kind of the way I understood it. However, Philoctetes wasn't guilty of that. Like, he is not considered guilty of any sacrilege, but yeah, he still had his difficulties, because when he comes back to his island, to his home island, he discovers that other people are ruling the island and he is not welcome, and nobody wants him there. He decides not to fight for his city. and, you know, to get back his power. He decides to leave and he goes to Italian Peninsula. He goes to Italy and he founded cities. Which cities, let me tell you? Macalla, Petelia, and Cremissa. And in Cremissa, Philoctetes was said to have constructed a temple to Apollo, where he laid up his famous bow and arrows. And we don't really know how he died. There is no like there's no information left about his death and how he finished his days. But yeah, this is the story of Philoctetes. And I thought it was so just fascinating and interesting, and he's such an interesting, fascinating hero with such a great story, and I've never heard of him before. So yeah, I was just, yeah, I'm in love. It was all so interesting, and yeah, that's why Philoctetes is right up there for me with Ajax. So yeah. And yeah, so the play that is in this book is dedicated, like I said, to Odysseus and Neoptolemus coming and trying to get Philoctetes to Greece. First Odysseus suggests his great plan, but then Neoptolemus is shown here in this play as a really nice person, unlike the Song of Achilles, because by Madeline Miller, in the Song of Achilles, Neoptolemus was shown as a really like terrible kind of person. In here, he's just a really nice guy. He's a very nice person. He feels for Philoctetes. When he hears the story from Philoctetes, he feels for him, and like he just refuses to trick him. He doesn't want to lie to him. He doesn't want to use deception. So yeah, it's like it's this moral dilemma of Neoptolemus in this play. It is also this terrible pain, and you feel this pain with Philoctetes when he discusses his life on the island alone, when he discusses how he was betrayed by his people, when he describes the pain of his leg and how he suffers, and it's all so present in this play. It is like you feel it all. Your heart hurts. Your heart hurts when you read it. Like I almost cried, because it's really, it's very touching, and it's just so, you feel it so much. So yeah, I really liked this play, and it's like I said, it's one of my favorites in this book, and I would really highly recommend it to you. So yeah, this is the first 4 plays of Sophocles. Ajax and Philoctetes are my favorite. But Philoctetes is connected to the women of Trachis, so if you want to read Philoctetes, read the women of Trachis. Electra is considered one of his best plays. Electra is also like closer to the end of his life. I think it was like 410 BC, and he died in 406 BC. So Philoctetes is so Electra is also a very old play, so it's one of his best plays. So yeah, a great collection of plays in this book, so I think it's a good place to be introduced to Sophocles. But also the next book that will be featured in the next video is the 3 Theban plays, which these plays are also quite famous for him. So yeah, this was the first video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if you read Sophocles' plays, which plays were your favorite, what you thought of them. Do you like Philoctetes as much as I do? Do you like Ajax as much as I do? I think they're just so interesting. Just mwah. Ajax, Philoctetes, my favorite. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're having a very good day. I will see you. I don't know when I will see you, but I will see you eventually with the continuation of the Theban plays. So yeah, have a great day. See you soon. Hopefully soon. Goodbye.